Welcome to Down Payment, and in this episode, we are talking about HR. It is one of the most overlooked support functions critical to our operations in the dealer space. We're going to talk about it with Charles coming on board for this episode, so stay tuned for this episode of Down Payment.
Welcome to Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers. Prepare to learn something new about the industry that keeps us moving.
Check out all our podcast content on our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X. Welcome back. In today's episode, we're talking about HR. So there are a lot of core functions to every car dealership that we spend a lot of time talking about. We've got marketing, we've got sales, inventory acquisition, pipelines, and we spend a lot of time working on that. And then we have the support functions that every business needs to have. We've got our accounting, we've got compliance, but really an important core function that almost every dealership lacks full capability in, to their detriment, is HR. We don't spend enough time developing good HR and talent management capabilities in our dealership. And so this episode, we're going to be bringing Charles on board, and we're going to be talking about HR as a core function of our businesses and how it's so important to have mature, well-developed HR capabilities in your dealership, basically regardless of the size of your dealership. So even if you're a small operation with just a handful of employees, or you're a big dealership with 20 or 50 or 100 employees, you have to have a conscientious HR strategy. So for this episode, let's bring on Charles.
Hey, Ted.
Hey, Charles, how's it going?
Going well.
It's great to have you
I think this is
back on the show.
Yes.
And, you know, we really look to you to kind of give us the benefit of the corporate background you bring. And corporate spends a lot of time on HR, as I understand.
Absolutely. Human resources is probably one of the most important functions of any business. From your hiring practices to your disciplinary practices to your termination practices to even how you treat each other in business. HR is a function that should be involved in all of that. And I think what you find in dealerships is that owners become HR. And that's not what should happen. There should be somebody between the owner and the staff to help to help cushion and give that person somebody to go to and say, I think I've been treated unfairly. I think this is happening and I think it's wrong. And it shouldn't be the owner making the decisions until every other process has been involved.
That makes sense. So, you know, the HR, the chief of HR, the chief human resources officer function is not an appropriate role for the dealer principal, the owner, the top person in the dealership.
No, not at all. Because you're setting yourself up in when things go haywire. If you're making that decision, you're going to be the one held responsible along with your business being held responsible. However, if you go through HR and you go through an entire HR process, it's going to put you in a better position that you're not going to have that lawsuit happen or the internal strife because you have somebody who's in charge of taking care of those issues.
Yeah. So it's really hard to have those HR processes that are designed to protect the business.
Absolutely.
In place, managed by the dealer principal at the top. You really need someone, even if you're not big enough to have a full-time HR person, you have to have someone that's at least cross-trained in HR.
Absolutely. Because if you look at everything HR is involved in, from the hiring process through the termination process, through reviews, through pay, with everything, all the reason HR person is there is to protect your business. to make sure employees are treated fairly and equitably, but they're there to protect your business. And I think that that's what we miss out a lot of times, is that human resources does a lot of other things, but we fail to understand that they're there to protect the brand. And protecting the brand is one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah, yeah. We all get kind of this negative connotation with HR, and HR it's difficult. It can be clunky, and no one likes dealing with the HR complaints
Mhm.
and all. But you need to have that there as an outlet to address employee issues, because if you don't have that outlet, only recourse for the employee is to escalate it to the regulators, the attorneys, the lawsuits, and that sort of stuff.
And the litigation begins.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you that defending yourself in a lawsuit, you may win, but it's going to cost you a lot more than having somebody in your dealership who can say, "Don't do this at this moment." And one of the biggest things is terminating people. You're termed. We're going to fire you. You're out the door. Now let's think about this. Is there a process in place that you have followed in order to do that? Because we know that people get really hot headed. There's not a process. There's not a, you don't give somebody a verbal, a written, a final that gets them out the door. You say you're gone because I don't like the way you're doing things. Now Colorado is a right to work state, and you can do that, but you can also be sued. And even if you win, it's going to cost you more money than not than following a process that's going to be successful for you.
Yeah, it's all about, the process allows you to build the documentation to defend yourself.
Absolutely.
And
But even in the hiring process,
yeah.
um, when you're interviewing for a certain position, are you giving everyone a fair and equitable shot? Because the interview, you just ask the same questions. You can ask side questions, but the same questions everybody who comes through the door. Okay, we can do that. But if you don't, you're short-circuiting that person. And I work for a company that got sued by someone we interviewed because we didn't ask him the same questions we asked his son.
Interesting.
And we won the lawsuit. However, it cost us more money to defend ourselves than just we would have been to hire the guy and walk him out the door after the process goes through. But we failed to follow those proper HR instructions.
Yeah, and one of the things that you've kind of pointed at is it's important to have someone that's trained in the HR function,
Mhm.
and so that they can also be a source of advice for the person in charge, for the dealer, the general
Absolutely.
manager, the president of the company.
And I believe that whoever is in charge, the president of the company, the general manager, the owner, whoever it is, they should be fully aware of what's going on. However, they should not be that final decision maker. That should all come through HR. And then they can support HR and say, well, no, we went through the process. Here's why we made the decision we made. And there you go. Because, I believe, especially in terminating employees, I really believe nobody should be fired without knowing they're going to be fired. Being fired should not be a surprise to anyone. But I think when you get to smaller businesses, it becomes a surprise because we don't have an HR, someone to intervene and help us work through that process.
I think another kind of theme that we're talking about is depersonalizing.
Absolutely. It's not personal. This is about business.
This is about business.
And if you have to terminate someone, I don't believe you have to have a long conversation. And HR, and we're talking about protecting the business, so I can talk about termination right now. Go in and say, here's what we have done: A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. We gave you every opportunity to improve, and you know what? It's not going to happen. Therefore, we're going to terminate your employee. Please have a nice day.
One of the things.
Period.
Yeah. One of the things I found when we developed a good, sophisticated disciplinary system, leading all the way up through termination, for the cases that we needed. It made it easier, at least from my vantage point, to terminate someone because
Absolutely.
we had everything in place. Like, we had a tight system and all of our documentation was there. All of the questions, ambiguities were ironed out, and we had a strong defensible position. We could honestly say we tried our best with this employee. We gave them a fair shake, that we were acting responsibly, proportionally, and reasonable to the behavior issue we were dealing with. It wasn't a shock to the employee. In fact, by that time, they were typically ready to be out of there anyways. And it made it easier because it was no longer, it truly was a process and it wasn't personal.
And it wasn't my opinion. Now, I want to make this clear. If somebody is stealing money from you, there is no process. There is no process. You have proof they stole money from you. You walk them out the door, forget the process. So there are those occasions the process doesn't work. But when we're talking about performance-based termination, you really need all that documentation. But even people who go out on leave, people who go to the hospital, people who have other illnesses, and you say, well, we're not bringing them back. You better think again, because there are certain laws that govern what position they can go into, what they can come back to. And if you don't have someone who is expert in that or understand what that is, you can then go, you can start fighting that battle again, and chances are you're going to lose.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential pitfalls in HR, and that's why you need some sort of expert available to you. And you could train someone in-house as kind of like their second function. It's also possible to bring on HR consultants in addition. So these are people that are trained in HR. They have education in HR that can, often graduate degrees in human resources that can provide you advice. And then you can also go to attorneys that specialize in HR and employment law. Just for, clear disclosure, we're not attorneys. We don't provide legal advice.
No.
But the big thing,
however, if you can take a GM and you can train him in the basics of HR, that will help you a lot before you have to turn anybody else. Just the real simple basics. And I mean, that's a lot of information. There's a lot of things you can do, but it basically comes down to, are you just doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Are you doing the right thing, or are you making it personal and flying by the seat of your pants? Because that, in the long run, that can absolutely hurt you.
Absolutely.
And I think that as small business starts to evolve and our society gets more litigious and everybody's looking for the quick buck, trust me if you don't think people walking in your door are not looking for that reason.
Absolutely.
And a wrongful termination, that can be very lucrative for somebody.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, a lot for dealers to consider. I think it can be really tough for those kind of on the smaller side. So when you are 20 or 30 employees or less, it's hard to have or be able to support a full-time HR person, but you still have major HR responsibilities for a business that size.
Absolutely. And so training people in the simplicities of it will save you a lot of time, effort, and energy.
Yeah, and then
money in the end.
Have the consultant and have the attorney for when you do need to be able to escalate major issues to get higher level advice. It's important to have that in place. And gosh, if you don't, it is a scary, scary prospect to run without it.
It's a scary process. Absolutely. But it's a necessary process. And again, HR is in place to protect you and your brand. No matter what size company you have, it's there to protect you and your brand.
Well, I appreciate it, Charles, a lot for our smaller operations in particular to consider here. Any parting thoughts?
Oh, you know what? Just do the right thing. Just do the right thing. Train somebody to help you in these times, and it'll make your business a lot easier.
Okay, and that's what we're all about here. With that, it's been another episode of Down Payment. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Check out our podcast on all our social media channels. We are at Down Payment Podcast on YouTube, Down Payment Podcast on Instagram, and Down Payment Pod on X.
Thank you for listening. Down Payment, the podcast for used car dealers, is a production of Meta Financial Services Incorporated.